and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. I was reading some earlier and came across a quote I wrote down. Maximilian once said, "The secret of freedom lies in educating people, whereas the secret of tyranny is in keeping them ignorant." And I really think that this is what they have been doing. The mainstream media, the government, definitely when it comes to Ebola. And when you look at Ebola, they've continuously talk about it's not airborne, it can't be spread airborne. And it's been brought up by many, air droplets that you can't really see can, spread it, and they're like, it can't be airborne. And that's by defining airborne a certain way to be able to not to call it airborne. It's not in the air, it's in a droplet that's in the air. Well, CDC quietly came out and basically admitted that, it can be spread in sneeze droplets. I have one here out of the New York Post. CDC admits droplets from a sneeze could spread Ebola. Give me a second. Ebola is a lot easier to catch than health officials have admitted and can be contracted by contact with a doorknob contaminated by a sneeze from an infected person an hour or more before. Experts told the Post Tuesday, if you are sniffling and sneezing, you produce microorganisms that can get on stuff in a room. If people touch them, they could be infected, said Dr. Merrill Naz of the Institute for Public Accuracy in Washington, D.C. Naz pointed to a poster the Center for Disease Control and Prevention quietly released on its website, saying the deadly virus can be spread through droplets. Droplet spread happens when germs traveling inside droplets that have coughed or sneezed from a sick person enter the eyes, nose, or mouth of another person. The poster states. Naz slammed the contradiction. The CDC said it doesn't spread at all by air. Then Friday they came out with this poster. She said, they admit that these particles or droplets may land on objects such as doorknobs and that Ebola can be transmitted that way. Dr. Rossi Hassad, a professor of epidemiology at Mercy College said droplets could remain active for up to a day, a shorter duration for dry surfaces like a table or doorknob, and longer durations in a moist, damp environment. So it's the CDC did not respond to a request for comment. And it just shows that, well, if they beat it into the consciousness of the unknowing public that it can't be spread by air, it can't be spread by air, it can't be spread by air, they think, well, if that person didn't directly touch or spit on something, well, if they sneeze from across the room and that air droplet traveled and landed somewhere, that's the potential. It's pretty amazing. And Christopher Green from AMTV, he put out a clip about this, about the CDC admitting to Ebola is airborne by droplets. And I'm going to cue that up here. Here it goes.
Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning into AMTV Alternative Media Television. Happy Halloween. Hope everyone is doing well. On a more serious note, Ebola has now admittedly become aerosolized according to the CDC, which means it can be transferred via droplets. This is according to the CDC website. They released a diagram late yesterday that was since taken down off the website that showed how you could contract Ebola, the deadly virus, with, by the way, 40 to 75%-ish kill rate, by the way, could contract the disease via droplets, which means that if somebody coughs or somebody sneezes and you inhale that virus, or it hits you in the eye, or it passes through your nasal passageway, or your mouth, or any other bodily orifice for that matter, you can contract the disease. Now, this is a sharp contrast to what we heard from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, a government agency, WHO, the World Health Organization, just a few weeks ago, who said you could not get the disease unless you had direct contact. Now, of course, we know that this is total and utter bullshit because there's been scientific studies done, which I mentioned in my documentary, The Truth About the Outbreak, namely in Canada, where they separated primates and pigs in two separate cages, and then the infection spread mysteriously without any direct contact, leading the scientists to believe the only logical conclusion was that the disease was airborne and it spread that way. So you see, the CDC is releasing this information piece by piece so that the American people, I think, can digest the truth about this deadly disease, maybe quite literally. So this is very serious. Now, of course, there's some debate on what defines an airborne disease. Technically, an airborne disease is defined as a disease, Ebola or any other disease for that matter, that can be transferred via a liquid carrier. Droplets is technically different. But in my mind, and I think in Americans' minds, and I think in just people in general, the fact that the CDC has now admitted that in addition to direct contact, you can now become infected and transmit the deadly Ebola virus via droplets that go airborne in the air, which means when you cough or sneeze, they travel on particles, droplets, it's particleized, it can move from person to person. Now, of course, studies have been done, and I believe personally that this virus is full-blown airborne. And again, the CDC is releasing this piece by piece quietly as so that they don't cause panic. As we discussed this before, and it's just common sense, the CDC, a government agency, the President of the United States, Washington, the elites, they're not going to tell you that the outbreak is going to worsen. They're not going to tell you the seriousness of the outbreak because their number one priority is to quell panic and to keep the people in line, to keep the masses moving the same direction. So this is quite serious, a quite serious development. And the diagram that was released, I actually took a screenshot of. I was lucky to get a screenshot of it, has since been removed from the CDC website. So Ebola now officially has become aerosolized, meaning it travels via droplets on an airborne path from person to person. Again, I think in the not too distant future, they're going to release it again, piece by piece, and finally admit that it's full-blown airborne and can be transferred via a liquid carrier. But it really is just a semantics game, folks. It really is just a war of words. Bottom line is that this disease is spreading. It's been brought to America willfully. Obama still has our borders open. People are still flying in to the United States. We have U.S. soldiers, estimates ranging from up to 4,000 that have been deployed in Liberia with guns to fight the virus that are also being exposed. And at least our soldiers are being quarantined. We're not seeing this happen with civilians, with people like Thomas Eric Duncan that exposed himself to hundreds, if not thousands of people upon his return and his resulting death. Of course, the New York City physician who had been working with Doctors Without Borders, who came back to New York City and exposed himself to the New York City subway system, went bowling, took a taxi cab service, went to the park. Craig Spencer. I believe all of this is going to worsen dramatically in the coming months. There's going to be an explosion of the infection rate. And once it gets really bad, once the fear really starts to ramp up, Obama will just spin it as a humanitarian crisis. It'll be, wow, this is out of control. Sorry. We underestimated the outbreak, just like the CDC underestimated the infection rate in Africa just a few months ago, and now it's exploded to over, I believe, 1.4 million infections, and I'm sure that number is wrong, by the end of January 2015. So although, it's good to take time with your friends and family, celebrate the holidays, celebrate Halloween, this puts everything into perspective as we travel. Some of you maybe even travel internationally, or you travel through airports and, through the airline system in the coming months, knowing now that the disease can also be contracted via droplets. So if you're in a situation where there's recirculated air, and you're doing just what normal people do, normal Americans, as I travel quite frequently myself, you're being exposed to this deadly virus. And of course, I'll be watching this very closely, as I think you should as well, and to see how this develops and how the infection rate actually moves forward in the coming months. Hopefully they can contain it. Hopefully the government has our best interests at heart. But as we learn time and time again, they don't. And there's a reason we need to have a healthy distrust for our government agencies, the president, as was the very foundation of the United States of America and this great country. I'm Christopher Green. Get this video out everywhere. Make it viral. Hard-hitting it in your face. And click the link.
Okay, and that's another thing that, they're going to sit there and slowly leak it out. Now, he says that way people can digest it. Well, I really think it's to throw people off, not to, so many different things come out. You don't even know what the truth is no more, unless you're following every step of the way. And I think that really is kind of our responsibility. But if your tax dollars, you're being robbed of money to pay for these things, and they're not consistent with what they say, and they're not accurate with what they say, how can you believe them? And someone linked to the CDC has been in the news, and Maine obtained a court order placing temporary restrictions on nurse Casey Hitchcock's. And then there was more breaking news about it. Maine judge lifts Ebola quarantine on nurse. And that's out of benswan.com New York Times is reporting that a Maine judge has ordered the Ebola quarantine to be lifted on nurse Casey Hitchcock's, choosing to disregard quarantine orders. Hitchcock and her whereabouts have become a MSM fascination. NBC News confronted her and her boyfriend on a bike ride. On one hand, the media is pumping up hysteria using strong language like outbreak regarding the case of Ebola in America, yet they're ever so happy to follow this woman closely who previously cared for Ebola patients in Africa. Like her lawyer pointed out, she has the right to do and act like she is. It's not about her being defiant. It's about her exercising her rights and not living in fear, said Alan Sash to Inside Edition. And I want to play this clip from him, the lawyer of Nurse Hitchcock. And I'm not for government using force against other people that, well, she hasn't been, she doesn't have Ebola as far as we know. She has the chance of having it, but she has no symptoms and nothing. I think this comes down to the character of her. And honestly, if I was to have a nurse and knowing her background, I would not allow her to be my nurse. There's no way. Her character does not show someone that really cares about other people's health. And it's really sad because I've seen firsthand in the medical field with these nurses just really a disregard and the lack of humanity for the people that are in the hospitals or rehabilitation places. It really seems like the only drive they have is, well, if I become a nurse, I get paid better. It's not making minimum wage as far as they're concerned. Not saying it, the schooling and all that, but I've also known a few people that have went through schooling and really didn't know what they were doing, but were able to pass the test and all that. And it amazed me. I'm like, really, really don't have a comprehension on what's going on, but somehow you're able to pass the test. They party all the time, but they can fill in the blanks pretty good. And hopefully that they turn out well. But I don't know what the drive is, but I do see a lack of humanity, a lack of character in a lot of these health care officials. And I don't want to say all, there are some really good ones out there that I've met too that, that's their character is to be helpful, to be compassionate, to really have that humanity and have that respect for others. And I think that's where this nurse is lacking. But let me go ahead and play this clip here from the lawyer. And this was on Inside Edition.
Alan, I think a lot of people are asking the question, why is Casey being so defiant?
Stephen, it's not about her being defiant. It's about her exercising her rights and not giving in to the fear in the community surrounding her.
I think some may argue, okay, why not just do the quarantine in your own home, make everybody happy, keep everybody at ease, just do it, relax. Why not?
That's exactly the point, that she could give in to fear and she could give in to junk science, or she could stand by her principles and medical evidence and say, no. Throughout history, there have been instances where people reject science, reject the facts, and go by their fear. and we understand why people are afraid, but part of this is an awareness of what Ebola is, how you get it, and what are the risk factors. What she should be doing, and which she has agreed to do, and which she does, is get monitored and checked twice a day. And that's the standard protocols. She doesn't have anything, and she can't give it to anybody if she's out at this stage. If she develops symptoms, at which point, then the appropriate remedy would be for her to self-contain herself. But at this point, we are not there yet, and we don't want to give in to the hysteria and just do what people want because it makes them feel good.
And so she's willing, she develops symptoms tomorrow, hypothetically, she'd be willing to then, of course, go into quarantine.
Oh, absolutely. She's a medical professional. She's a nurse. She's living in the real world of science and medicine and facts. And she would do that in a nanosecond.
People are calling her whiny. People are calling her selfish.
You know, when people say that, it's very easy to say to someone else when it's not them and they're not in the position. But I bet you if the shoe was on the other foot, they would feel that their rights were being infringed upon, they were being unduly stigmatized, and they wish it wouldn't happen to them, and they had the guts to stand up for themselves and their rights. Everything has to be measured. Being safe than sorry is correct, but to what extreme? If I tell you there's a chance of you going outside and you're going to get attacked by a tiger, well, you know what? It's very unlikely. So what do? Do you barricade yourself in your home, or do you risk it? Getting into a car accident is certainly a possibility, but you do it. You put other people in danger as well. But you measure and you balance the risks. Based upon Casey's situation, asymptomatic, she's been healthy for the last 2 weeks. She is at low risk for the Ebola virus. There is no reason to treat her as if she has the Ebola virus.
Okay, now, she's a medical professional and she has science backing her and facts and medical experience. Well, if you're looking for facts, you would immediately understand that this Ebola outbreak is not like previous Ebola outbreaks. This Ebola strain is not acting the same way, and the result from it is definitely a lot different. Previously, Ebola would break out in a country over there in Africa, and by the end of the year, usually it was contained or stopped, or maybe one person came down with it and spread it to another part, and they have a small outbreak over there, but it was nothing major. This Ebola, it's completely different. That you don't need any type of training or degree to understand when you look at those facts. That it's acting different, it's spreading different, and its kill rate has been, in the 70%, range. And that's with these people being treated. So, when you look at the facts say that it's acting different, you should maybe exercise a little bit more caution. Stop treating it like, it's no big deal. I understand, having your rights. No, government should not come around forcing people to do things. But I still question the character of this nurse. It's one thing to say, she don't want to live in fear. Well, don't live in fear. Live in the facts. And, well, she's a medical profession and science. She looks at science and then relating science to facts. Well, yeah, there's a lot of facts in science. But there's a lot of unknowns. And when you look at the basis of science, It's actually based on theory. The bottom, when you get to the bottom of science, it's based on theory, because even though we got, let's say 2 theories that, well, they prove to work out, both of these theories, but how can they coexist? And they come down with string theory. We still have to look at science as not being 100%, because it's based on a theory. How can we experiment with these 2 different theories and they both turn out to work, but they don't, we can't figure out how they can coexist, and we come out with string theory? It's based on a theory. So science isn't 100%. And then the medical field. Well, you don't exercise medicine. You don't create, as in, when you're working on someone in the medical field, you're not creating medicine. You do what? You practice medicine. Because medicine isn't 100%. The medical field is not 100%. Remember, this is the whole basis of why it's so hard to go after a doctor for doing something and it not turning out right. Well, it's not 100%. But because she wants to be stubborn about it and hard-headed about it, I'm in the medical field. I'm a medical expert. So you're right half of the time. Good for you. I'm not saying that, the medical profession isn't, needed. But I think it's, I definitely think it's on the wrong path. I don't see this turning out well. So I just think it would show more character in her if she was to go. I don't think it's gonna. I have it. I'm pretty sure I don't have it. But, I do want to take this little bit of precaution just to make sure. She's going to be one of the most hated nurses if all of a sudden she starts throwing up in a public place. Oh no, I'm feeling a little dizzy, and starts throwing up. Yeah, she is not going to be liked by most. And, of course, you have the politicians playing politics with this whole issue. And Republicans, Democrats just playing the same left-right paradigm BS. And I would like to see more independents running. Definitely at the federal level. And I think organizations like Free and Equal, founded by Christina Tobin, those are organizations that it's not even about politics as, a gain of power. It's about breaking that power down. When you go and your ballot has 100 different people for president, you're really going to understand the different views. You're going to understand that, hey, we are a lot more diverse than Republican, Democrat. And you'll get to choose. And some of them will maybe be part of the Libertarian Party, or the Green Party, or the Constitution Party, or the Justice Party, or independent. But I think that independence, when it comes to the independent candidates out there, I think that these people probably the most understand how dangerous the party system is. Ben Swan interviewed the candidate, and let me bring it up here. And he's poised for a congressional upset. And he is Mark Wichern, I believe is how it's pronounced, candidate for Congress in Florida, Congressional District 1. And I'm going to go ahead and play this interview.
Said, but you are running for Congress as an independent, correct?
Absolutely. I think part of the problem we have is dealing with both the parties. Obviously, as you know, they control pretty much everything in the government from the top down through fundraising. So a lot of the thing I've been researching, obviously, is some of the fundraising that goes on. It's real interesting when you start looking at when the money starts and what bills are being passed. So, for instance, you have like one side of the aisle which will go after, let's say, the internet bill, for instance. And we always know there's always everything in Congress usually is stagnated, so you don't ever get a decision out of it. But when you start looking at the reasons why, it becomes very interesting. For instance, the internet bill I was talking about is, when it's SOPA, SIPA, whatever you want to call it this year, you have one side of the aisle which obviously goes out and fundraises against the tech industry. And immediately, since they say we're not going to let this bill go through, you'll see the fundraising numbers. And this is all public information. You can kind of see how it flows through. On the left side of the aisle, you have them going after the motion picture industry. And you get to see that they're fundraising on that side. And when you really watch the fundraising, whoever raises the most funds ends up getting the majority seat leader as well as the committee chairs. So to me, you've got a private party controlling our Congress, and this to me is unacceptable because they're unelected.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the heart of the problem that we have in our political system right now, right? Is that cronyism seems to trump everything else. And for a long time, people were buying into this left-right paradigm of seeing these two conflicting sides that almost balanced each other because they had, polar opposite interests. But of course, what we find, for those of us who are awake on this issue, what we find is that there is no competing interest. It's the exact same interest. It comes back to cronyism, big corporations, big money flowing into the system. If I'm going to put a lot of money into a campaign, it's probably because I want ROI. I want return on investment. And that's unfortunately what happens. How was your campaign being funded?
Well, I took my retirement and I put it in. So we started out, I took $250,000 of my own money, and the way I look at it is it's probably not going to be worth $10 in another 4 years anyways with the Fed. So I actually took $250,000, put it into my own account, and didn't have to worry about the fundraising. We've done really well with about $200,000 of it so far, and we're doing really. Picked up a lot of probably about $50,000, I would say, somewhere in donations as well. So, and the support we've got here is just absolutely outstanding. I had two guys from Omaha, Nebraska, drive 22 hours after they heard about me to come down here and help us out on our campaign. They had no intentions of hotels or anything. Of course, I went ahead and put them up. We had another local veteran that came into it and actually put up an entire billboard for us at the busiest intersection in Fort Walton Beach. And just phenomenal response from the voters across the area. People are starting to grasp this through our town hall meetings because I'm actually taking the time and explaining how we got into the position and what we need to do to get out of it. And it's really hitting home. People are starting to really understand this now.
So tell me about some of your positions. You want to eliminate the IRS, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, let's face it, the IRS is completely unconstitutional, especially when you look at the lower end of it where you're dealing with payroll taxes. There's no law in existence that requires anybody to pay payroll taxes. The IRS, and of course, let's not forget about all the lowest learner, lost emails and everything else. This place is just corrupt. All that money that we pay into the IRS doesn't go to the United States government for funding. It goes directly to the Federal Reserve to pay the interest on the money they create from thin air. So when America understands they have to dedicate 3 months to 4, sometimes 6 months of their lives to pay a tax that's completely unnecessary, they start to get a little irate, and that's what I think we're getting a lot of people jumping on board with.
Well, one thing that's interesting about your campaign, we mentioned the fact that you have a Republican background, but as running as an independent, you said you're drawing in both Republicans, independents, and Democrats. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. We're pulling Republicans because obviously I'm a constitutional conservative. Matter of fact, I'm the only conservative in this race when you look at Jeff Miller's voting record. But we're pulling in a lot of Democrats because they're starting to understand, because a lot of them are dealing with, obviously, the invasion we got going on the southern borders, and a lot of the benefits are now being taken away from them and moved elsewhere, to illegal aliens. Not to mention when you start looking at the lower income brackets, such as fixed income on retirees, lower income persons in like Escambia County, they're starting to understand that they have a limited income, but the dollar's still depreciating. So it takes more dollars to buy what they could have bought, and it makes it virtually impossible for them to survive now.
So in terms of your particular race, who is the incumbent there, and what are the realistic chances of unseating an incumbent?
Well, I mean, this has been, I couldn't ask for a better thing from God than to be able to sit in this position, because you got Jeff Miller, who's the head of the Veterans Administration scandal, who has done absolutely nothing for our veterans up until just about a month ago when, he started feeling a little bit of pressure. And so you've got that working on. So we started looking at what his voting record is. For instance, he voted for, obviously, the indefinite detention of American citizens in the NDAA Act, and or the funding of the National Defense Authorization Act, as well as voting for the Patriot Act, which you know as well as I do is wiretapping and illegal searches and everything else inclusive in that. So he's kind of set it up, and he's already decided he's won already, so he's not even doing any campaigning, which is phenomenal. So our whole goal was not to go on the outside until the very end and just kind of work underground as best we can, and working with all the different trade shows and everything else we've been at, and knocking on doors, going old school on the marketing as far as campaigning, and it's worked out really well. We have a tremendous amount of supporters. People are just jumping on board. So we like our chances here. They look really, really good.
Now, Mark, I know that you've gotten a lot of support from different groups, including Oath Keepers is backing you, the Tea Party down there is backing you, and I believe the Libertarian Party. You've actually kind of bridged a lot of these groups together. Can you tell me about some of the endorsements that you've had? Yeah,
we got the Tea Parters backing us, and they can't really endorse, but they recommend you vote for Mark Wishern, as well as the Oath Keepers here in Northwest Florida, and you've got I even got the first time in history the Libertarian Party actually endorsed a non-libertarian, which, again, I'm not a libertarian, but I've got their endorsement because they understand what I'm doing. And again, this whole thing is to unite, to restore people is what we're trying to pull together because, as you know, this nation is completely divided up. You got the blacks versus the whites, you've got the rich versus the poor, you got the Democrats versus the Republicans, and it just goes on and on and on. What we need to do is come together as people and realize that the people are more important, especially than these parties. And how I'm running this campaign is putting the people of District 1 first, the people of Florida second, and then the people of the United States third, and then we can talk about political parties.
Well, and I think it's incredible when you take a look at the support that you have garnered, and you mentioned about the Libertarian Party being the first candidate there that they have endorsed who is not a libertarian. And I think it speaks to what you're trying to accomplish here, which is that people of both parties, right? Humanity over politics. We talk about that all the time. Humanity over politics. As you're moving into the final weeks here, because you're almost there. Obviously, it sounds like you feel pretty good. The final step of this obviously has to be getting people to get up and go vote. So it's one thing for people to say, "Hey, Mark, we're with you. We support you. I agree with what you're saying." It's another thing for them to actually get up, go out on election day, and cast a ballot. What is the process? What is the plan to make sure that people are doing that?
Well, we are doing some follow-up with them, and all of our volunteers are pulling in, and we've got a commitment from each person not only to go vote themselves, but to commit to bringing 10 people to the voting booth with them. So if they only bring in 5, that's great, but they're committing to actually take people with them to the voting booths and make sure they vote for me. And that's been really strong. And I really think that, because a lot of times you hear people, yeah, sure, I'll vote for you. But I think now that they've gone through these town hall meetings especially, they truly understand why they need to get to the voting booth. Because what we're doing is we're making people relevant again, and that's what we need to do.
Okay, explain that a little bit. Making people relevant again. What does that mean?
You know, when you talk to people, you have such a vote. Like in the primaries, for instance, we only had in one county down here, 13% of the voters showed up to vote in the primaries. And when you talk to people about it, it's like, well, my vote doesn't really mean anything anyways. They're just going to do whatever they want, so forth and so on. So when I say we're going to make it relevant again, we want to make it so the people are actually in control of the government. And some of the plans and the reason why they're coming on board is during our town hall meetings, we explain to them, I've got an 8-year plan laid out. This is exactly how we get our country back, step by step. And you can't do it with the shotgun effect of going into Congress and thinking, I'm going to change congressman. That's not realistic at all. But what we can do is you work on the area from where you live, our district, for instance, and using my business background to be able to increase the profitability of the companies that are here and also introduce some additional patents I plan to release to the public so we can actually start building things here. Looking as well as farming and so forth, we want to push that back into the full effect because right now it's set up to where the EPA obviously intrudes on everything you do anymore. And we can't go from the field to the plate and without going through a federal distribution system on our food. So our goal is to kick the feds out of District 1. And we can actually do that by using the Constitution and fighting on jurisdiction. Because Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 specifically states that the federal government can only own the District of Columbia and the federal enclaves, the only land they can own. So when you really look at these national forests and everything else that we're dealing with, it's unconstitutional. So once you look at Article 4, Section 4, as well as obviously the 10th Amendment, anything not authorized by the United States, for the United States government to do, it falls to the states and the people. So using that, what we're looking to do is get in a constitutional sheriff in here that's going to back us up. And I do understand how the whole sheriff system works. And as long as you got money trickling down from Washington, then you really can't do a whole bunch because the sheriffs are dependent upon the Washington money. Whereas if you can build the economy up around the sheriff and get them weaned away from the Washington money flows, then we can have more control of our sheriff's department. And that's the key. You lock down the sheriff's department, then the sheriff has the power to kick the feds out, and that's exactly where we want to be.
It's kind of a tricky thing on what you're talking about in terms of, it sounds like you're a guy who says, here is the proper role of government, constitutional role. It's limited on the federal side. The local level is where things need to happen, and yet you're running for office on the federal side. And so there's a little bit of a trick there in terms of, how do you, work to limit your own power, which is a very rare thing to find anybody who's willing to do. I mean, there's a few guys out there. You got Thomas Massey, you got Justin Amash, you have Walter Jones, a few congressmen out there who are working to do that, but there aren't many, Mark. I hope you know that you get into Congress and you're going to be in the vast, vast minority of people who want to see less power in the hands of the feds. How do you deal with that?
Well, and again, that goes back to the business background. When you build a franchise prototype, the goal is to duplicate the system over and over again. So my first year as congressman here, my goal is to complete that system and to be able to set it up to be able to start spreading this to other districts. In other words, going directly after my hometown, which is up in Hamilton, Ohio, where I believe John Boehner is, if I'm not mistaken. You go in, you cut the head of the snake off. And by actually using this program and duplicating it over and over again, I know in the first 2 years I'm not going to make an impact in Washington. They're going to look at me as the freshman, the nobody. But that's not my goal. My goal is to take care of District 1, set up the systems and procedures, and then duplicate it over and over again by training people and putting on these training courses for how to run for Congress and what to do when you're in there so we can get state sovereignty back. So, yeah, I'm going into a federal position because I think you don't have any power on the state level right now. So we need power up in Congress. And let's face it, if I'm the congressman here, instead of having 30, 40 people at a town hall meeting, you're going to have 300-400 people there. So I'm planning on using the impact of the media as it comes out. Because let's face it, if I beat Jeff Miller, or let me rephrase that, when I beat Jeff Miller. It's going to be bigger than what happened with Cantor, because now you got an MPA knocking off one of the safest seats in the Congress, And now you're going to have a media blitz coming in here. We want to use that to take our program and then blast it throughout the United States. And people are going to start asking, what in the world is going on in District 1 of Florida?
Right on. Well, I hope when you beat Jeff, we will be your first interview as the now newly elected Congressman, Mark. I
can guarantee you'll have my first exclusive interview because I really appreciate you sticking up for us little guys down here, and it's been wonderful working with you and talking with you.
So that was Mark Wichern, Florida's first congressional district, running as an independent. Like you said, he's getting the backing of a lot of groups that would be unlikely. The Libertarian Party rarely backs a non-libertarian. That's a very rare thing, and wish them the best. And support groups like organizations like Free and Equal. They're out there trying to break this whole, left-right paradigm and allow independents to have a voice. And Ben Swan's doing a good job of that too. So these are definitely things that we should be looking at a lot more. Okay, I guess we'll switch gears a little bit here, because I was over here at We Are Change, if I can get back up. Okay. And this was a pretty good report, if I can find it now. It should have been right there. Of course, they'd probably try to hide it from me. There we go. I don't know why everything's loading so slow. And this one was Bill Gates, the Jason Group, CIA, Raytheon, and big oil companies are trying to control the weather. And there's a commercial to skip here. Okay, here we go.
This is Rudowski of We Are Change that are here at the Great Hall of Cooper Union in New York City. I am joined by Clive Hamilton, who is a professor with expertise in geoengineering. Now, I just listened to Mr. Hamilton's talk, and it was really eye-opening. And I had the question. It's kind of a loaded question, but what does Raytheon, big oil companies, Bill Gates, the CIA, and the Jason Group have in common?
Well, all of those groups are involved in thinking about and researching geoengineering one way or another. So Bill Gates, for example, is investing in a number of geoengineering companies and projects. He's backing scientists doing that kind of work. The security state is taking a close interest in it. They're carrying out inquiries. They're worried about it. They're interested in it. And then you have a whole bunch of right-wing think tanks as well in the Beltway who, although they've spent years denying climate science, are now saying, hey, geoengineering might be the way to go.
There are a lot of, it's a large group, but it seems like the groups have one common denominator, is that usually they don't always have the public interest, in their perspective, in their kind of lock. Why are they working on geoengineering?
Well, I think their reasons are very mixed. The whole thing is driven by some scientists, some very eminent and capable scientists, and they started working it basically because they are completely freaked out about climate change. They recognise that where things are getting really bad, that Plan A is failing, Plan A being cutting global greenhouse gas emissions. And so these scientists started to say, well, don't we need a Plan B? Once we get into really serious trouble, if there's a climatic emergency, we're going to cross some climatic threshold or tipping point where beyond which there will be no return. What should we do? Can we have some other way of tackling climate change if we get into this kind of emergency? And so they began talking about, for example, a sulfate aerosol shield that would reflect some sunlight back into the atmosphere and cool the planet. It sounds like crazy science fiction, but in fact it's a very serious proposal getting a lot of work. And when the scientists started to do this, a lot of players started to be attracted to them. Bill Gates, for example, he's a kind of techno-fix man. He says, well, what we need is some magic technology to get us out of this difficulty. Some of the people in the Pentagon and associated organisations are taking interest because other countries might be doing it. China, for example, they want to be ahead of the game. The right-wing think tanks, this is a really interesting one. They deny climate science, but they're interested in geoengineering, and it reveals something very important about climate science denial, and that is that it's not about the science. Attacking the science is really, for them, collateral damage to defend their ideology, and their ideology is the kind of thinking that likes geoengineering if it means controlling nature, if it means defending the economic and political system, if it means protecting the oil companies from a devaluation of their assets. They like that kind of solution to climate change rather than carbon taxes and restrictions on what we can consume and destroying 80% of the asset value of Exxon. So you can see politically why conservative think tanks and in private some Republican politicians are talking about geoengineering as an answer to climate change.
Do you think this sulfate aero kind of spraying is possible? Do you think it's going to happen anytime soon?
Well, it's certainly possible. I mean, there's no doubt it will work. I mean, and the scientists are confident it'll work because of volcanic eruptions. Large volcanic eruptions spew huge amounts of sulfate particles and ash and so on into the atmosphere, and it's been known that these big eruptions do actually cool the Earth. The global climate is transformed because all of this stuff in the upper atmosphere reduces the amount of heat reaching the Earth from the sun for 2, 3, 4 years. So sulfate aerosol spraying would mimic the effects of large volcanic eruptions. It can definitely work. Of course, there will be consequences. You might cool the planet, but all sorts of other things like making the hole in the ozone layer bigger, like stopping the Indian monsoon, which is necessary for 1 billion people to eat. These are the kind of consequences that may also happen. So yes, it can definitely cool the planet, but it's an enormously risky thing, and if we ever get to that point of actually doing it, then we really are in deep, deep shit. And the question is whether doing that will get us in deeper shit, particularly if one nation does it and other nations, maybe with nuclear weapons, disagree. So the consequences of it could be monumental, and yet we could find ourselves in 20 or 30 years' time crossing climatic tipping points, temperature soaring, dramatic changes in the world's weather, millions of people dying, and people will come along and say, look, this is catastrophic. The only way to stop it is by spraying sulfate aerosols into the atmosphere. It's a terrible dilemma, and that's why we get back to these scientists who originally put forward the idea and are researching it. They're not sort of crazy Dr. Strangeloves. Actually, some of them are, but some of the others are, very genuine people deeply concerned about the environment. So it's an awful situation we find ourselves in.
So is it safe to say in the possibly near future, mega corporations, oil companies will be doing geoengineering? Is it possible?
I don't think we'll ever get to the point where mega corporations are engaged in geoengineering. It's only a government, a state, that would do that. There is a bit of concern about rogue billionaires just going out and doing it. But it's also true that fossil fuel corporations have taken an interest in geoengineering, and quietly behind the scenes they're dipping their toes in the water and funding this project and that. But the big mega geoengineering projects like sulfate aerosol spraying, I can't ever see a fossil fuel corporation doing that. That's something that governments and militaries will get involved in if it should come to that. And I should say, I actually think it's likely that will happen. And even though I say that with great trepidation, I say it because we're not doing anything significant about climate change. And this so-called pause that we've seen in global warming is in all likelihood going to come back and bite us very hard very soon, and then we really will be in trouble.
Can you tell us about your book and tell us where people could find out more information about you?
The book is called Earth Masters, The Dawn of the Age of Climate Engineering, published last year by Yale University Press, and you can buy it in any good bookshop, or if you're desperate, I'm sure you can buy it on Amazon as well. And it'll tell you everything you need to know, including the science, the politics, and the ethics of geoengineering.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Hope you guys liked the video. Click like if you did. Click subscribe. There's more videos coming your way.
Now, if you listen to a lot of what he says, he talks about, it becoming fact in the future. About if the military and Pentagon start looking and, experimenting with it. But if you know history already, this happened in the Vietnam War. The military has been experimenting. Years ago, I don't know if it was PBS or what channel it was on, but it was talking about geoengineering, not only talking about it, showing how they could use salt water using boats to spray the salt water into the atmosphere and create artificial clouds, and they were doing it. So this becoming some factual thing in the future is BS in the first place. So all these people he's talking about, you best believe are already funding it. And, I see a lot of fake chemtrail pictures that aren't actual chemtrails. You see a plane where it flew through a cloud and there was a sustained moisture trail behind it, but only for a while, and then it stopped. Well, it turned it off. That's when you look up and it looks like a damn chessboard, or you look up and there is a 5-pointed star in the sky. That's going to be a pretty good indicator. When it's a completely clear day until they put a chessboard in your sky, and then that chessboard slowly turns into a continuous cloud. There's something going on. Whether it be weather modification, satellite disruption, trying to block something they're doing from foreign satellites, could be. But they're not talking about it. They're denying it when there's patents on it, when there's companies that have been created based on geoengineering. It's the fact that there's so much secrecy around it that leads people to believe that there's something nefarious going on. So I'm not going to say, all this chemtrail stuff you see on the internet's true. But I'm going to tell you that it does happen. They do geoengineer. They do testing on it. They've had something on TV showing them spraying salt water out of these boats into the atmosphere and it creating clouds. it's not that I wouldn't want it to be a nice day out and get the right amount of rain for a crop to grow. But I also understand, Earth fixes itself. Nature fixes itself. It, has its routines. And I think when we start playing God, we don't know our consequences from it. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try to, come up with new technology and better ourselves. But we have to, I think, be a little bit more cautious when we do it and not allow people to have monopolies on it. Because when there is a monopoly and it's a tool that could be used to control others, you best believe that some of the evilest people will seek those positions. And it's the same with government. Well, many of you know the founder of Peaceful Streets Project, which after that whole Cantwell and Bueller fiasco, I didn't feel comfortable talking or trying to have either one of them on, which I initially wanted to have Antonio on. Wouldn't mind to have Chris Cantwell on, even though I disagree with both of them on a lot of things. Definitely Antonio. But some good news for him. Out of BenSwan.com, Peaceful Streets Project founder Antonio Bueller found not guilty after cop crosses thin blue line. Austin, Texas, October 21st, Peaceful Streets Project founder and activist Antonio Bueller was found not guilty of failing to comply with an order from a police officer on Wednesday. The misdemeanor charges stem from an incident on New Year's Day 2012 where Bueller witnessed Austin police officers ripping Norma Pizzana from her friend's vehicle. Bueller stopped to record the incident and was harassed and eventually arrested for resisting arrest and allegedly spitting in the face of APD officer Patrick Borski. Although a Travis County grand jury later dropped those charges, he was indicted on a Class C misdemeanor charge of failure to obey the order of an officer. The failure to comply charges come from allegations that Bueller refused to put his hands behind his back when ordered by Oborski. The officer testified in court. What the hell is going on here? There we go. The officer testified in court that Bueller was verbally aggressive and claimed he saw Bueller as a threat. Bueller's attorney, Millie Thompson, told the jury that officers were in fact the aggressors. Norma Pizzana testified about her experience at the hands of APD, stating that she had never been treated like that by a male. Another witness said he saw one of the officers poke Antonio in the chest like he wanted to pick a fight. The incident was caught on cameras as well. Throughout the trial, Officer Oborski and APD Cadet Instructor Officer Carrillo seemed to lack knowledge of the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. The prosecutor defended Oborski, stating the officer is not a constitutional scholar and shouldn't have to know the details of the Constitution. Despite the charges for the alleged spitting being dropped and all but debunked, Officer Oborski continued to repeat the claim. Of the 4 videos shown in court, none of them show Oborski wiping off the alleged spit from his face. Oborski also testified that his uniform had been tested for DNA evidence of Bueller's spit, yet no traces were found. In a move that shocked many, former, as of 10:30, so yesterday, he is now a former Austin police officer, Jermaine Hopkins, testified in defense of Bueller. Hopkins countered Oborski's statements, telling the jury that verbal expression alone is not interference or reasonable suspicion to detain someone. Hopkins also told the court that he was notified by his supervisor that by participating in the case, he would be out of a job after October 30th. On the third morning, a juror entered the courtroom and handed the judge a letter detailing the reasons they would not be able to reach a verdict. The juror said an unnamed group would cause harm with physical violence if the juror continued. He claimed to be experiencing paranoia, anxiety, and psychosis. This almost caused a mistrial, but the defense agreed to trial by a 5-person jury rather than 6. Typically, misdemeanor trials last a few hours. This one involved 25 hours of proceedings over 5 days. By the end of the 5-person jury found Antonio Bueller not guilty of failing to obey order from a police officer following the New Year's incident, which led to Antonio Bueller's arrest and assault. The Peaceful Streets Project was launched. Bueller says the PSP is dedicated to holding police accountable by filming police and holding Know Your Rights training sessions. A group has spawned a number of chapters around the world. Perhaps when Officer Oborski told Bueller, "You effed with the wrong cop and now you're going to effing pay," he was unaware that chain of events would create. However, in the end, it seems Oborski and the APD may have messed with the wrong activists. So I think that's definitely a good thing. Not saying I agree with his tactics or any of that, but I don't think he was guilty. And a cop lost his job by testifying. And that really shows the corruption of, the whole police and law enforcement community. Here is another one. Federal judge rules case against cop who killed dog may proceed. This out of Liberty Beat, the libertybeat.com. A federal judge has ruled that a couple may pursue their lawsuit against a Vallejo, California police officer who killed their dog during a police visit to their home. Erica Gregory and Lauren Mulliner say that officer was sent to their home to speak about an ongoing fraud investigation. Officer Chase Calhoun stated that when he entered the couple's yard and walked toward the door, he saw their 2 dogs coming towards him and believed he was going to be attacked. The officer fired 2 rounds and killed one of the dogs. This is actually linking back to courthousenews.com. We bring it up there, see if there's more of this article here. Okay. Says here, according to Calhoun, he shook the gate before opening it, heard no response, and entered the yard. As he walked toward the front door, he saw Bell, and Flicka moving toward him and realized that he was going to be attacked by not one but two dogs, according to U.S. District Judge Kimberly Mueller's order. Calhoun drew his gun and fired 2 rounds, killing Bell. He left the yard, closed the gate, and requested that an animal control unit be sent. Hearing the gunshots, Gregory came out of the house and saw her dog lying in a pool of blood. Calhoun, who claims that he acted in self-defense, was the only witness to the shooting. Mueller found a genuine dispute as to whether Calhoun shooting the dog was reasonable. Gregory disagreed with Calhoun's claim that the dogs were barking and snarling and that Bell's teeth were showing and that hair on the back of her neck was raised. Gregory said her dogs were not aggressive. She offered the declaration of their tenant at the time, Elizabeth Cartwright, who said that she felt no threat by the friendly dogs on the first day she met them by herself, and she interacted with Bell every day. Cartwright said her friends entered the property without any issues as well. On summary judgment, the court cannot determine as a matter of law that says wouldn't necessarily find Officer Calhoun perceived an immediate threat or of death or serious bodily injury at the time he shot Bell. Officer Calhoun is the only eyewitness. The court may not simply accept that may be self-serving account by Officer Calhoun, and based on that testimony find that there is no genuine dispute of material fact, Mueller wrote. We seen that video on YouTube that the officer sat there and shot that dog was whistling. Yeah, that's what it was. That officer that started whistling at the dog. So yeah, we definitely can see that these officers are willing to shoot a dog. No problem. Let's see where we're at on time before I go on here. Okay. Okay, here we go. I think my internet's just acting so slow right now. I don't know what the hell's going on. Maybe someone's trying to hijack my wireless signal that I got too. And seems like I'll see my wireless flash every once in a while when I go in and throw the firewall back up. Full throttle. Kick them off. It's not too hard for people to hijack the signals anymore. Okay, here we go. Well, damn it. This one coming out of NLI.com. Privacy group files FTC complaint against Facebook for alleged privacy violations. The Electronic Privacy Information Center, EPIC, has filed a formal complaint with the Federal Trade Commission over a 2012 study that manipulated the news feeds of almost 700,000 users in order to track emotional changes. The complaint alleges that Facebook deceived its users and violated a 2012 consent decree with the FTC by conducting the study. The company purposefully messed with people, or purposefully messed with people's minds. Epic stated that in the complaint released Thursday. The study involved Facebook changing the number of negative and positive posts shown to users in their news feeds over a week in January 2012 in order to track how it changed the emotional tone of their own messages. The study published last week found that users were indeed influenced by the emotional content of their newsfeed. Users who saw more negative posts wrote more negative posts, and users who saw more positive material wrote more positive posts. Facebook never sought or obtained permission from users to conduct a study. Instead, they argued that their policy gave them sufficient permission to conduct the research, the San Francisco Chronicle reports. The influential journal that published the original study was not so quick to brush aside concerns. An article published by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences noted that while the editors deemed it appropriate to publish the paper, it is nevertheless a matter of concern that the collection of the data by Facebook may have involved practices that were not fully consistent with the principles of obtaining informed consent and allowing participants to opt out. Epic is now seeking to get the FTC to enforce the privacy consent order, while also accusing the company of engaging in deceptive trade practices. The group contends that Facebook misuse of data is a deceptive practice subject to FTC enforcement. Facebook is also currently under a 20-year consent decree from the FTC that requires Facebook to protect user privacy. The consent decree resulted from complaints brought by Epic and a coalition of consumer privacy organizations in 2009 and 2010. Epic noted the reaction of the study in Canada, however, seems much more muted, according to the Star. Now, I don't see how regulating this is really going to do anything. They'll just find another loophole. Loopholes will be put there because I'm sure government still wants their take on Facebook. We know that they use it. Law enforcement uses it. And this should be a reason to leave Facebook. This should be a reason for others to create something that says 100% privacy. We don't conduct studies on you. We don't experiment with you. That, and then there's other deeper web type sites that have popped up that allow you to be more anonymous, and those are definitely a bonus. And I really need to start getting more back up to date with all the technologies out there, because that's where we're going, whether you like it or not. If you choose to remain kind of stalled in your technological growth, I think you're going to run into some problems in the future, definitely with protecting your privacy. And, older you get, the less you really want to have to learn new stuff. But I think it's also important when it comes to keeping your brain healthy, keeping you informed, and being aware of the issues that are going on around you. And, that's important if you want to, keep freedom. If you want to be able to exercise your freedom. And, Albert Camus, I'm probably going to butcher this a little bit, but he said, to the effect, the only way to live free, absolutely free in an unjust world, or the only way to live free in an unjust world is to live so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. And I think that's a quote that has to ring true with anybody that understands what freedom is. You cannot let tyrants push you around. You have to live so absolutely free in a unjust world that you are a rebel. When the world becomes so unjust, what a lot of people fail to realize, you are a rebel to a point. Just because they haven't came after you does not make you less of a rebel. They say, most Americans commit 3 felonies a day. 3 felonies a day. Think about that. People that don't think they've done anything wrong have committed 3 felonies a day. When you become another obstacle in their path to absolute power, they have everything in place to take your freedom. You have to be a rebel, because right now we are in an unjust world. Now they'll try to say, oh, Josh said that you should become a violent person. No, I said a rebel. And there's one thing in that quote. It's to live so absolutely free. Not to commit crimes, not to hurt people, simply to live free. That means living your life not harming other people. Helping other people is always a good thing to do. People you disagree with, you should help out even more. Character. It's really an extremely important thing in society, is to have character. And there is a broadcast coming on after this one, Character Matters, with Dr. George Simmons. And I'd urge people to tune into that. One thing good about UCY is there's a very diverse group of people and ideas, and others might not be libertarian minded as I am, but they still understand, I'm trying to fight for my freedom. If you keep fighting for your freedom and not fight to force people your way, just the simple fact that you should be able to exercise your freedom without anybody controlling you, and vice versa, you become liberty-minded. And even though I believe character matters, that doesn't mean that I agree with those who wish to control people that have a lack of character, like maybe the nurse. I'm not saying government officials should come with guns and keep her in her house. Saying she should have done that herself. And I think she, in some way, will be responsible if she causes it to get spread. And that's just something that society will end up having to, if it's just a societal shame. Just, that's what needs to happen. I don't agree with violence. I'm a gun owner. I have guns, but I don't believe in violence. I I can fight, but I don't believe in violence. I believe in being able to defend yourself, but I don't believe in violence. I don't think it does any good. And, you know, I heard people talking about if she infects people, they should, you know, put her away for life or, you know, put her in an electric chair. And so we should just continue more death and violence. Yeah, it's really worked in the past. Quote from Ethan Allen: "While we are under the tyranny of priests, it will ever be their interest to invalidate the law of nature and reason in order to establish systems incompatible therewith. And when you look at government in a way, for some people, government officials have become the priests. And, you know, I even seen it, you know, I was a Ron Paul supporter. I even seen it within the Ron Paul, the people that were just so Ron Paul that they almost worshipped him. I never thought the guy was perfect. I thought he was the best way to work towards a freer society. He was that foot in the door. If we could get him in the door, that would allow the liberty movement to continue to grow. But, you know, we have to really start looking at natural law. We have to start looking at what we're going to do, you know, with ourselves to further freedom. Okay. Trying to get this up here. Something I wanted to play from Derek Grayson, T-Mop. He was a Ron Paul supporter, and he ran for office himself. And very, very outspoken. And I definitely want to play this. The GOP is dead. Let me see if I can get it up here. Full of slaves. And here we go.
Hello, everybody. T-Mott, also known as Derek Grayson. This is not a drive time. What the hell? It is a drive time. But I'm sitting down. I want to just kind of talk to you for a minute. I have somewhat of a dilemma. I went to the debate last evening. My friend Ted Metz is running for insurance commissioner here in Georgia. The incumbent is a Ralph Hudgens. I believe that's the way you pronounce his name, or Hutchins, but I think it's Hudgens. Here's a guy that was present that sparked the controversy with Nydia Tisdale. And that was even brought up in the debate. But that's not the point of the video. On all of the shows that I like to pre-record and watch later, ads are running left and forth, left and right, back and forth rather, for the two individuals that are in the race for Senate, Perdue and Michelle Nunn. And I'll come back to that. But last night, Ted Metz did an outstanding job in answering the questions concerning the state of Georgia as it relates to auto insurance, Obama, etc., etc. I was very proud of the job that he did. If you're here in Georgia, I urge you to do something different. When you go to the polls, ask for the independent ballot and do something different. Ted Metz for insurance commissioner. I encourage you to vote for Amanda Swafford for Senate and Andrew Hunt for governor. If you don't like Common Core, do not send Nathan Deal back. If you don't want them to just simply change chair positions in D.C., don't send David Perdue. Now, why am I making this video? Besides giving an endorsement to the three people, actually it wasn't an endorsement, it was encouragement for you to go and do something differently, because we need a change. And I'm not talking about what Obama promised you. Not that kind of change. That was not change. That was just changing of the guard. One group of royals for another. I posted something on my Facebook page, and I want to read it to you so that you understand where I'm coming from. Here we go. One group thinks they are the masters of their own lives, being overrun by the poor who are too lazy to do for themselves. The other group thinks they are victims, aligned with saviors, and together they are trying to free the rest from the grip of old school racists in suits and ties. The reality is both these groups are ruled by royals that have created a fourth branch of government, CBM, and it renders the balance of power between executive, legislative, and judicial moot. My problem is, how do we free these new slaves from the grip of these two parties? Truth has no effect upon willful blindness. And that is my enigma. When I left the debate last night, there were throngs of people with signs on either side of the street coming into Georgia Public Television, the studios where the debate was held by Loudermilk. And they were for one group or the other, Democrats or Republicans. When I left the Democratic Party was because I realized that party was largely responsible for the re-enslavement of black people after Reconstruction. But now I've come to realize that many people in the Republican Party are slaves, just like blacks and other whites in the Democratic Party. I ran as a Republican because I believe in conservative ideals. The Republican Party, they were responsible for the freeing of blacks. But the Republican Party has become co-opted by the same royals that run rampant within the Democratic Party. And the one thing that has become painfully clear Every time I hear people in the Republican Party blame Obama, I say in my mind they're no different than those in the Democratic Party. Every time I hear them blame Democrats, I realize they are enslaved to this same party as well, and none of it is changing. So if members of both parties are enslaved by the party, how do we fix this mess that we're in this country? People will post, well, a vote for Amanda Swofford is like a vote for Michelle Nunn. How do you overcome this dilemma? I don't want to jump parties. Well, I certainly wouldn't go back to the Democratic Party, but going back to the Libertarian Party wouldn't serve much of a purpose when most of America is caught up in either of these two parties. How do you free these new slaves? I don't know. We have a project that we're working on with called Operation Educate. I hope that it is a solution. But when I hear even my own friends in the Republican Party, I was sent an invitation to show up to support Purdue because Rand Paul was in town. I think Ted Cruz came. And this was from a person that knows I don't support Purdue. So just because Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, people who I believe are simply a part of controlled opposition, because they showed up, I'm supposed to go? They're a part of the problem. What part of, if they are working for me and things are not getting any better, if they're working for you and things are not getting any better, what part of voting for them or supporting them or getting on the bandwagon with them to support somebody whom I've told you that David Perdue is about gun control, but yet you all claim that you're pro Second Amendment? I can't wrap my brain around it. But it is not something I am not familiar with, because I come from a community of people, black people, that were just as hell-bent on following the Democratic Party as many of the Republicans I have now come to see are in following and supporting the royals of the Republican Party. Michael Jam Smith, a friend of mine, commented that he wouldn't waste any more of his time on Ron Paulers or Derek Grayson, the Derek Graysons being plural, people who actually believe in liberty and freedom and are fighting for it, but are members of the Republican Party. He wasn't going to waste any more time because it was pointless. I think he was saying that to say he would only vote for independents or libertarians. I'm not there, but I agree with him about wasting time. Should I continue wasting my time on Republicans that are too damn blind to see that the Republican Party, the royals within the party, are no different than the royals within the Democratic Party, and the Republicans that support them are just as blind as the people in the Democratic Party that support the blacks, that support the royals of the Democratic Party. Equally blind. And for Republicans who think that it is the poor overtaking them, let me point a few things out to you. Black people only make up less than 13% of the total population of the United States. There aren't enough poor black people to even put a dent in keeping you from being able to find the jobs that you want, or taking away jobs from you. That's just the lie that you have been told. Just like on the other side, when I tell black folks, there's not enough racism in this country to keep you from overcoming and achieving the goals that you set out for yourself if you are so determined to have them. But it is a tool and a tactic that has worked so beautifully. Willie Lynch should not have been a myth. but a reality, because those principles sure as hell are working. I just need to figure out what I'm going to do next. T-Mod out, do I have time till next time? But I can tell you this much. I'll be damned if I'm going to quit. Peace.
T-Mod, Derek Grayson, and that's what a lot of Ron Paul supporters really came to the conclusion of after the second president, or third, I should say, presidential run by Ron Paul. They were just fed up. They were done. They've seen the corruption in the GOP that was basically going, okay, yeah, you guys won, but we're just going to change the rules. So now, guess what? You lost. And, it's just being completely fed up that even when you do it by their rules, you still end up on the losing end. Like, what? Okay, I won by your rules. And you go, yeah, we don't like those rules anymore. No one has the confidence. And, listening to him, you understand it's the people that are behind it. And it's not just the Republican Party. It's the same with the Democratic. Here, you want to see the character of these people? Go to benswan.com. Caught on video, husband of Democratic state senator charged with stealing election signs. This is the character of the people. And the video's here. It's a 2-minute video. On Wednesday, the police in Middletown, Delaware, issued an arrest warrant for Dana Long, the husband of Democratic Senator Bethany Hall Long, on the charge of stealing campaign signs left on the roadways, such as the one featured in the video above that says, "Fix the economy, vote Republican." According to Delaware Online, the video from First State Liberty was taken after 28 signs were placed on Middletown, Odessa Road, at Silver Lake Road, and on the 700 block of Middleton, Odessa Road. On Sunday, removed and then replaced by campaign volunteers on Monday, and then once again removed. Campaign volunteers arrived with video cameras to stake out the spot where the signs had been removed. At 2:35 a.m. on Wednesday morning, in the video, they pointed out that the signs looked like, along with the fact that they were labeled paid for by the Republican Party of Delaware. At 4:01 a.m., the volunteers reported that a car pulled up. A man got out, and he started lifting campaign signs. The man, who has been identified as Dana Long, openly defended his action, saying, "There's no name on these signs," as he proceeded to carry the signs to his car. In the video, the campaign volunteers documented Long stealing the signs, as well as his car and license plate number, and the fact that other similar stolen signs were present in the backseat of his car. According to Delaware Online, the charge against Long is a Class A misdemeanor punishable by up to 1 year in prison and a fine of up to $2,300, including restitution and other conditions set by the court. That was by Rachel Blevins out of benswan.com. And this is a character of, both sides, the Republican and the Democrat sides. The top people in these organizations, political groups, they work together. They might fight about what direction to go, but they're fighting for control. And when that's evident, what really else is there to say? You have two corrupt parties that nothing they do has your interest. Absolutely nothing. I haven't seen anything. Okay. We have about 15 more minutes here. Let me bring up this article here I had. If I can find it. I had it bookmarked. With everything going on, you have the possible pandemic just kind of sitting there on the horizon. We have government that we know takes advantage of any crisis or even the fear of a crisis. This out of WND Health. FEMA conducts pandemic training in New York, and New Jersey. Talk about timing. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, is currently in the middle of a 2-year pandemic training exercise with New York City and northern New Jersey. Titled 2014 Pandemic Influenza Continuity Exercise Strategy. The FEMA training simulates a global pandemic of influenza that spreads from person to person, including in the U.S. The Obama administration, meanwhile, is under fire for its mishandling of the Ebola crisis, allowing infected people to enter the country and cause widespread panic and political turmoil as officials make claims and promises that turn out to be false. The FEMA training began last year before the current Ebola outbreak in West Africa, which has killed nearly 5,000 people, which that number, why do they keep hitting fake numbers out like that? There's been proof that it's done more damage than that. But anyways, an overview of the training includes a list of assumptions such as that the clinical disease attack rate will likely be 30% or higher in the overall population, utilizing a prediction from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The FEMA overview, which includes a training schedule, warns that economists, epidemiologists, and other experts predict the effects of a modern-day pandemic will be seen in every industry and government agency at local, regional, national, and international levels. The overview states history teaches us that the impact of a pandemic can be far-reaching. The 1918 Spanish flu influenza killed approximately 30,000 people in New York City, 500,000 people in the United States, and as many as 50 to 100 million worldwide. Furthermore, it leads to widespread social disruption and economic loss. The overview states a pandemic can threaten all critical infrastructures by its impact on an organization's human resources, causing a loss of essential personnel from the workplace for weeks or months. FEMA is preparing for the possibility that 40 to 50% of both government and private sector staff will be absent for periods of about 2 weeks at the height of a pandemic wave. A wave is defined by FEMA as a period in which community outbreaks occur across the country. The simulated outbreak assumes multiple waves of pandemic illness could occur, with each wave lasting 2 to 3 months. Numerous training events and seminars have already been held the past 10 months. On November 13th, FEMA is planning a pandemic influenza wave 1 full-scale exercise. Full-scale exercise, that's always great. So, now that you know this, if something comes out on November 13th about on the mainstream news going, there's an outbreak in New York or somewhere in New Jersey, and we have a FEMA responding to a wave of of a pandemic here, well, you know that they already planned on doing this, that it's probably exercise that the media is playing off as actual something going on. You almost have to report on these type of things. Otherwise, you risk it being used and pretending that it's actual, pandemic. I don't trust anything the government does anymore. Really, they're so corrupt that even if they are trying at a point or are telling the truth at a point, can you really trust it? I think that's what a lot of these politicians don't understand. Well, if it comes down to it, yeah, I'll blow the whistle. I just still, even these whistleblowers, I take everything, all of them do, with a grain of salt. And I think more people are because, just look at Edward Snowden. A lot of people go, is he leaking this for a reason? What's going? Yeah, you should ask these. Now, I don't think you're going to have something where you're going to find out all the time that, yeah, government's behind it. No, it's one of those things that you do have to question it, though. I think that's extremely important. I will take a call for the next 5 minutes. 5 minutes. If you would like to call in, voice your opinion, discuss anything that we've talked about tonight, you can do that. 718-717-8296. Feel free to call in. 718-717-8296. Okay. Kind of go to something here since it is Halloween, and I hope everybody has a great Halloween. Something from Reason.com. I figured it'd be something nice to share for Halloween. Spooky politicians that go bump in the night. The end of October brings children disguised as pretend ghosts and goblins, and politicians whipping up fears of supposedly real ones. As predictably as falling leaves and longer nights, the end of October brings children disguised as pretend ghosts, goblins, and politicians whipping up fears of supposed real ones. Democrats air spooky commercials alleging a war on women, on the poor, on teachers, on unions. Republicans speak of Islamic extremists poised to achieve world domination or terrorists wielding an Ebola weapon in the United States. Both sides share the same message. The world is uniquely dangerous, and we are happy to keep you safe. To think otherwise, that the world is less dangerous, seems foolish. To state it publicly is presumed to be a political liability. After all, the world looks uniquely dangerous, especially if you focus on the dangerous parts. A new Cold War seems in the offing when Russia annexes the Crimea and sends its proxies into eastern Ukraine. President Obama's offhand remarks that the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, ISIS, was Al-Qaeda's JV team, has been played back insistently as ISIS has seized territory in Iraq and Syria. Ebola could be the modern equivalent of the Spanish flu of 1918 that claimed over 50 million lives worldwide, or for the U.S. at least it could be more like the swine flu of 1976, which killed one person. More people died from the vaccine to prevent it. We simply don't know, but there are times, especially in the closing days of an election campaign, when it seems positively absurd to argue that the world is not very dangerous. We can always use a little perspective, however, and campaigns shouldn't be fact-free zones. Of course, there are dangers in the world. There always have been, and there always will be. But one's chances of dying a violent, premature death are at their lowest point in recorded history. The website humanprogress.org, full disclosure, a Cato project, documents many ways in which our lives are improving, and Americans in particular enjoy a degree of security and well-being that our ancestors would envy and that our contemporaries do envy. I'd like to argue that. We might not fear other countries as much, but now we fear our own. Well, some people do. When we think of the litany of threats that Americans worry about, some are rather familiar. We still worry about war with major states or about being drawn into wars with minor ones. We worry about the proliferation of mass casualty weapons, especially nuclear weapons. Now, this ain't speaking for me because I'm not. I think only a few people having these type of weapons give them a monopoly on force, so yeah. And then there are new worries, from cyber terrorism to threats to our environment, the air we breathe and the water we drink. We are so fearful it could be that confluence of old and new threats contributes to widespread perception that the world is more dangerous than it ever has been. True, many of these dangers have always been out there. The Roman equivalent of Al-Qaeda terrorists were the assassins. Even nuclear weapons have been around for decades. But the combinations, Al-Qaeda with nukes, cyber terrorism, seem particularly new and thus particularly frightening. Plus, our perception are inevitably distorted by probability neglect. We focus a lot on the nature of the danger, but misperceive the likelihood that it will occur. At a minimum, we should scrutinize the claims on a case-by-case basis. Take, for example, the state of the global economy. Some fear that a war or the mere threat of war could disrupt global trade and commerce, including the world's oil supplies. This concern, at least today, is the main justification for U.S. military forward presence around the world, a posture oriented around stopping possible threats before they materialize. But the patterns of global trade and far more resilient than the pessimists envision. War between major trading partners in our increasingly capitalist world is highly unlikely, and even if it were to occur, trade flows between non-belligerents would not be disrupted, or not for very long. While war itself has many horrific effects, the costs that the Americans pay to stop all wars are unlikely to be outweighed by the benefits. Exaggerated fears of distant conflicts even prompt the U.S. to fight wars that pose no direct threat to U.S. security and to spend too much on the military, which in turn weakens overall U.S. economy by diverting resources from the more productive private sector to the government. Too many harbingers of perils start from a presumption of certainty. We live in a uniquely dangerous world, and things are getting worse. Therefore, we must do X, Y, and Z more than those supposed dangers lurking behind every corner. We should fear the politicians' appeal for policies that we must enact. There is a political harm, after all, in taking politicians at their word. Individual liberty is often threatened during periods of heightened fear and anxiety. Necessity is a plea for every infringement of human freedom, declared William Pitt the Younger in a speech to the House of Commons in 1783. You can read the rest of that at reason.com. Spooky things that go bump in the night. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Stay tuned here on UCY.tv and have a great weekend. Take care.